Thank you for coming today. My name is Angela Banks. I'm thrilled for the opportunity to share with you an exciting research and innovation presentation about improving adolescent literacy outcomes through professional development centered on morphology to build academic vocabulary. So let's get started. Today's presentation will proceed as follows. I will begin with the problem of practice, highlight an analysis of the scholarly and professional literature, share the conceptual perspectives, provide an overview of the methodology, identify some essential questions for moving the work forward, and conclude with some implications of this work. National data indicate there is an adolescent literacy crisis, with approximately 30% of our nation's 8th and 12th grade students performing below the basic levels of literacy. This number is even greater among minority youth, indicating this is also a matter of social justice that appears to fall along economic lines. Yet these data do not tell the whole story. The actual proficiency rates are slightly higher, around 35%, for the same groups of students. But what does it even mean to be proficient? It's not just reading and basic comprehension. Today's adolescents are measured on their deep comprehension skills, which include their ability to locate and integrate information using sophisticated analyses of the meaning and form of the text, and to provide specific text support for inferences, interpretive statements, and comparisons within and across texts. This boils down to analysis, synthesis, organization, and evaluation. That's the crisis in adolescent literacy. Most students lack the ability to perform tasks that require a deep level of comprehension. If these are the skills required of today's youth, what can be done to bridge the gap from basic to deep comprehension? The literature review for this research proposal focuses on the science of reading bridging processes for building deep comprehension, recommendations and studies for developing academic vocabulary in secondary students, and the training offered to pre-service and school-based educators in developing content area literacy skills. From research on reading development, there are 4 overlapping bridging processes that contribute to the development of deep comprehension skills in secondary students. Background knowledge supports being able to make and understand inferences and provides a framework for class discussions and analysis of content knowledge. One study in particular examined the impacts of cultural background knowledge through reading passages with Black and white students. Results indicated that a lack of understanding of references common in the Black community led to the misinterpretation of the text and inferences by white students. Background knowledge is also commonly assessed through vocabulary assessments, showing the overlapping nature of these processes. Writing is rarely articulated as a reading bridging process in the science of reading. However, the literature indicates strong correlations between writing and deep comprehension. For example, in 2 different dissertation studies examining the impact of writing on reading, results showed that direct instruction and practice in summarizing and note-taking produced statistically significant results for all students, including minority and low-income participants. Vocabulary knowledge is key to deep comprehension and is highly studied in the literature. One study examined the correlations among reading comprehension, inference making, background knowledge, vocabulary, and word reading for secondary students with struggling or adequate reading abilities. This study yielded the highest correlations between vocabulary and comprehension, as well as vocabulary and background knowledge, once again indicating the overlap of these bridging processes. The final bridging process is morphological awareness. Morphological awareness is being able to use knowledge of prefixes, suffixes, and roots to determine word meanings to aid in comprehension. One noted study specifically examined the impact of morphology on academic vocabulary development for secondary students with a Latin roots intervention. The results showed large positive treatment effects for morphological analysis to problem solve the meanings of unfamiliar words and attain higher accuracy for target academic vocabulary. Among these bridging processes, morphology is the one that is not regularly taught in secondary classrooms. As indicated from the bridging processes, academic vocabulary is central to building deep comprehension at the secondary level. Academic vocabulary is the specialized language that facilitates communication and thinking about disciplinary content. Being able to utilize and understand academic vocabulary is important due to the connection between academic vocabulary and discipline-specific concepts. Mastering discipline-specific academic vocabulary supports background knowledge and the deep comprehension skills of analysis, synthesis, and critical thinking, while decreasing overall comprehension problems. A review of research, compiled by a team of researchers, identified some key characteristics of academic vocabulary that can provide educators with the needed strategies to facilitate the acquisition of academic vocabulary in their students. 1. Most academic vocabulary contains Latin and Greek roots and is morphologically complex, meaning it is multisyllabic and longer. For example, words like predisposition, arbitrary, and metamorphoses contain multiple morphemes with Latin or Greek derivation. 2. The parts of speech within academic vocabulary are more concentrated on nouns and has the tendency of turning other parts of speech into nouns. For example, concentrate yields concentration. Yet these nouns are not the typical persons, places, or things, but abstract concepts. 3. Academic vocabulary contains grammatic metaphors. This means that terms are not literal, but contextual and figurative. For example, the phrase boils down to has nothing to do with an actual liquid. 4. Academic vocabulary is informationally dense and abstract. For example, words like circumference, respiration, or mitosis are abstract concepts and contain a depth of understanding of processes within the words themselves. From these characteristics, research suggests the use of morphological awareness, syntactic patterns, and content-specific instruction to build academic vocabulary. Professional learning around literacy for secondary teachers begins in teacher preparation programs, where pre-service teachers enroll in a content area literacy course to comply with state certification requirements. The continuation of this learning then comes in the form of professional development provided through schools, districts, and professional organizations. This pre-service content area literacy course is designed to teach the strategies that teachers need to use to support student literacy success in their specific content areas. However, the research indicates that this course is ineffective and does not lead to transfer of strategies into the classroom. The research also indicates a less than favorable disposition of secondary teacher candidates towards seeing themselves not just as content specialists, but reading teachers in their content areas. However, there is some positive research on the content area literacy course when it is combined with the content-specific methods course, or when teachers have to utilize the strategies themselves to navigate discipline-specific text. The literature around literacy learning for current secondary teachers from professional development seems to be limited to research studies and does not appear to be a priority for implementation in secondary schools and districts, indicating a gap between research and practice. One study with a researcher literacy specialist at a high school in Connecticut implemented a PLC of high school teachers where the teachers were instructed in content area literacy strategies. This was an ongoing support and collaboration group led by the literacy specialists. The results were positive for both the participating teachers and their students. What made this study effective were what research has identified as the characteristics of effective professional development. It was job embedded, collaborative, content specific, and of a sustained duration and in a coaching model. There is much to be done in the area of professional learning around literacy. From the literature review, there are key concepts that emerge. To build student capacity in moving adolescents from basic to deep comprehension, A research study must consider the bridging processes in the science of reading comprehension, academic vocabulary acquisition, and professional learning around literacy. The bridging processes in the science of reading are morphology, which is being able to understand and manipulate words based on prefixes, suffixes, and roots, vocabulary knowledge, which is being able to understand words in context, background knowledge, which is having the necessary prior knowledge to build and work with new knowledge, and writing, which specifically refers to writing about content knowledge. These bridging processes are not discrete skills, but work synergetically together to build deep comprehension skills in secondary students. The concept of acquiring academic vocabulary is rooted in morphology and vocabulary knowledge, because academic vocabulary is full of Latin and Greek roots, and the vocabulary knowledge is abstract, dense, and complex. Consequently, morphology and vocabulary knowledge are the common denominators in these first two concepts. However, vocabulary knowledge is regularly attended to in classroom instruction and teacher preparation, but morphological awareness is not. In order to build this capacity in secondary students, teacher training is required. To facilitate this professional learning in an effective way, it must be job embedded, collaborative, content specific, and in a coaching model, because those are the research-based characteristics of effective professional development. This conceptual framework represents the key conceptual findings from the literature review and provides a framework for the study. The research focus for the dissertation in practice is a professional development for secondary teachers in morphological awareness to build academic vocabulary skills in secondary students as a means for increasing adolescent literacy in deep comprehension. There is some research around providing professional learning to classroom teachers in morphological awareness that shows the potential to improve this skill in their students. The post-positivism lens is appropriate because it involves making and testing the claim that providing training to build teacher capacity in morphology increases the utilization and advantage of this skill in students. The research design is mixed methods with quantitative survey data and qualitative interview and field research data. The surveys will provide data on the use and effectiveness of the morphology learning in the professional development. The interview and field research data, in the form of classroom observations, will provide additional insights regarding the quantitative data, as well as the unique open-ended perspectives of teachers engaged in the study. The overall scope of the study is a 3-month timeframe in a rural 712 public school district in eastern Connecticut. There will be a district-wide professional development, followed by a self-selected PLC group with individual and group follow-up and coaching in a collaborative model. To analyze the collected data, I will compare pre and post survey data and run some statistical analyses. I will code the qualitative data to identify themes and categories. I also plan to use a coding software program to look at all 3 data sources together. The following questions drive this study and are essential for the work. 1. How can the principles of effective professional development be applied to professional learning in morphological awareness in a secondary setting? 2. What aspects of professional learning in morphological awareness in a secondary setting are most effective for building teacher capacity in utilizing morphology to build academic vocabulary in the classroom with their students? 3. What is the impact of professional learning in morphological awareness on classroom instruction in academic vocabulary? 4. What is the correlation between professional learning in morphological awareness and student use of morphological awareness to acquire academic vocabulary? As a future educational curriculum leader, the implications of this work prepare me to gain experience and deeper understandings regarding professional development, the design, the implementation, the follow-up, reevaluation, and adjustments. Through the review of research, one thought kept occurring to me, especially looking at the literature on content area literacy instruction training. Research is constantly focused on closing achievement and opportunity gaps and improving student performance gaps. But what we don't tend to talk about is what the teacher learning gaps are. What learning do they not have that they need? The reality is that they won't tell you. There is a huge gap between the teacher preparation course in content area literacy instruction and then what happens or what doesn't happen to follow up on that learning. In the area of social justice, equity, and inclusion, providing teachers with the tools, resources, and learning they need to meet the needs of a diverse student population is important for teacher equality. It is also a matter of social justice to provide high quality instruction to close all gaps, especially those in literacy and vocabulary, which impacts quality of life and future economic opportunities, especially for minorities and economically disadvantaged families.